Well, hello everyone, and again, thank you. Thank you for having me, and welcome. I am, as I said, on the western edge of the east coast of Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, where I live in a wonderful old church, a place that was built in the late 1800s. So it's always an adventure to present in an old building because at any point in time, things might kind of groan or move, and it's kind of fantastic in the world of Zoom that at some point in time, the house will decide to yawn or breathe, and you'll hear this. And every now and then, actually, the camera will move. And often it's not me. It's the house doing the moving for it. So let's talk about research. Let's talk about UX. Let's have some fun. And let's get some screen going here. This will be kind of fun. Run the World is a new platform for me to play with. So I'm kind of excited to do it. Let's share a window. And see how we're doing here. Fantastic. So, hello. Let's start it from the right place. So, again, my name is Boon Sheridan. I'll be your guide for the next 20 minutes or so. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from what I will be doing in a workshop at the full UX New Zealand later on in February. So if anything here sounds interesting, we'll do a deeper dive into it, and I'd love to see you there. So, better product research. Wow, that's an open-ended question, or an open-ended title as it is. And what do I mean by better product research? In this instance, I want to talk about research that avoids the dreaded false positive. For those unfamiliar with the term, a false positive is when you get a signal that something exists when it actually isn't there. Something you might have heard about, unfortunately, a lot in these COVID times. It's often used in the medical community. It's also really important in research. A false positive that tells you something is there when it isn't. And I struggle with them in research because they chew up resources, they waste your time, and they send you down dead ends that don't necessarily generate meaningful insights. So what we want to do is when we talk about false positives, we want to make sure we don't come away with a positive looking result that doesn't actually align with the reality of the situation and gets us to launch a product or a feature that doesn't meet expectations. So for an example, a year or two ago, I had a team member approach me with a project that ended in a little bit of frustration. They had tested a new feature in our company's app, and the feedback from the interviews had been upbeat, positive, everything was green across the board, and they were excited to launch it. People had told the research or the teammate that they liked the feature, thought it was easy to use, and said they'd probably use it when it launched. However, when it launched, it had very limited adoption, very poor numbers, and it really didn't meet the expectations of the team based on the research. And in this case, positive feedback led to a somewhat negative outcome because we dug into the research and a pattern appeared in the feedback. Let's look at some examples. Some of the feedback in these sessions are phrases I've heard over and over, and depending on how much research you've done and interviews you've done, you've probably heard them as well. Things like, well, this works okay for me. It looks great. I'd probably use it. Yes, I understand it. Or it's clean, simple, and easy to use. Notice how all the feedback appears positive. If you're not paying attention, you might nod your head and write up a report with the good news that people like it, it looks good, they understand it, and it's easy to use. The challenge is, with the people they were interviewing in this case, is that the folks didn't quite understand the feature or really care about the subject matter. They didn't really care about the app or the feature in the app. So they fall back on feedback like this. Why? Well, because honest feedback is sometimes harder to give in a session because it takes someone very comfortable to say things like, I don't understand this. I can't tell if it's good or bad. Or I don't want this, so it's hard to say it's usable. Or even to say, sorry, I don't care about this. And the one that I don't think we hear ever at all, I actually heard this somewhat from one person where they said, I'm the wrong person to give you feedback on this. Why does this happen? Well, people don't want to lie to us. People don't want to be rude, especially if you're paying them. If you're doing a session where someone's getting a nice stipend, You might hear, like, I want to have a good situation. People don't want to disappoint a researcher. We like to have harmonious conversations, and we like to have positive interactions. So when we're interviewing someone, it's very rare for a person to be really, really blunt with their feedback if it's not positive. So the reality can be that the feedback has a slightly different meaning. When someone says, oh, this works for me, okay, it does what you asked me to do with it. That's fine, right? You asked me to do a task, I was able to complete it, and it works. Task completion does not necessarily equal satisfaction or desire or a want or a need. Or when someone says, sure, this looks great, I'd probably use it, but they couldn't really tell you when or why, because the thing it does isn't important to them or it isn't critical to the life that they lead. Another one we hear a lot is, yes, I understand how this is supposed to work. What they're often saying is, I understood the test and only the test. They might say it's clean, simple, and easy to use. This is the one I love the most, right? Because a lot of times people are struggling to give positive feedback when they're not necessarily engaged with something they're seeing. Let's just say, you're showing someone an app about how to trade cryptocurrency. Well, if I'm not really interested in cryptocurrency and you show me an app that says, here's how to trade it, I can see how it looks, I can see how it works, and I can move some things around and say, yeah, this looks pretty good. It's an uncluttered app. The feature you asked me to explore looks pretty good. I understood your microcopy. The interactions don't surprise me. Everything in here works really well. So if a researcher said, so what do you think about this? I'd say, well, it's clean, it's simple, it's easy to use. It obeys a lot of the rules that the rest of the world or the world of apps uses. So it's great. And I want to give positive feedback. And, I'd like to get my check now or get my compensation before I leave. So each of these answers hints at something not quite right, and it could generate false positive results. I want to be clear, when we look at this type of feedback again, it's not that this feedback is negative. This could be absolutely great feedback if it really works for someone. The trick is, if you don't dig a little deeper, you might wind up thinking that, okay, this is good, right? If someone says it works for me, like, you want to dive a little bit deeper. Tell me about how you'd use it. Tell me a little more about what this might do for you. You want to dig a little deeper into just taking that surface level feedback. But again, why does this happen? And over the years, I have found these false positives are more likely to appear when something about the research is out of alignment. There's a little bit of misalignment between what you're researching and what you're looking at and where you are in the program or what type of questions you're asking, right? We look at the idea of we're going to research something, but make sure that the question we have and what we're researching fits the goals. A common pitfall is to ask someone about the design or the usability of a product without knowing if the product is something they want or even need. Right? Again, asking me to test something like cryptocurrency trading when I don't actually trade cryptocurrency or have an interest in cryptocurrency, I might not be able to give meaningful answers. I can give surface level answers, but I can't tell you why or how I'd use it. So without understanding where you are in that sense, you might get participants who struggle a little bit or give, again, that general hazy feedback that seems positive, but leads to broken expectations. I do my best to keep my research aligned by relying on a framework to guide my efforts. It's a framework that I want to share. And again, it's a framework. This is not a specific way for you have to do it. This is how I've chosen to structure a lot of my work over the years that helps me land the project where I think it fits the need and keeps my work aligned and specifically avoids false positives. The framework I use is based on Tomer Sharon's wonderfully excellent book, Validating Product Ideas Through Lean User Research. It's a wonderful book from Rosenfeld Meteor, that's a little bit of my New England accent coming out, it's a Meteor. I highly recommend it. You can get the ebook pretty easily. I'm not sure if it's still in print, but again, it's a fantastic book. And I used it to build out what I like to call a hierarchy of research questions, an approach to asking questions about a product. And what's great about it is each question feeds into the next. Okay. Pretty simple when you start looking at this list, this idea of what do people need? Who are your users? How do people currently solve a problem, right? Again, we're not necessarily talking about the product yet. We're talking about people, what people need, who might use it, how do they currently solve a problem? What are the workflows, right? We're getting a little more specific here. Do people want this product or feature? Now we're getting into, would they use something? Then can they use it? We're getting into actual the nuts and bolts of potential usability or task flows or things that are really deep into it. Then you get into things like what design gets better results. Now we're confident about all these other things, and now we can get into the nuts and bolts. And then how do people find things in a product? So we're really getting into something a little bit more granular, because you notice each of these things build on each other. There's a hierarchy here, a way that each question feeds into the one that follows. And this is important because I find a common misstep, and one that I've made more times than I'm comfortable admitting, and when I'm not sitting at a bar with a drink in my hand, is that you worked further down the hierarchy without knowing the answers to the questions above, and you end up with this false positives because you don't have people who understand the criteria, or you're researching a question a little too far ahead. If you don't know the answer to, do people want this product, then you're going to struggle when trying to answer the question, which design generates better results, right? If you show something to someone and it doesn't meet their needs, their opinions are going to be based on, again, superficial, in the moment, yeah, this looks okay. Or if we're asking someone, how do you currently solve a problem, but we're not talking to people who are the right folks that have this challenge, then again, you might get hazy answers. We're trying to identify each step so that we can get answers to the next and get further and further into specificity and further into having a meaningful research exercise that gets you insights. Again, this is all about generating meaningful insights that help you learn something. We don't necessarily want to come up with something that is just a very superficial and we use it to just make an A/B test or something like that. We're thinking about the product in the best possible holistic terms. And that sense of when a research project comes up, I often ask myself, okay, if we're asking people, so let's say number 5, in this case, the example I used before, the researcher was asking people, can you use this? I'm sorry, they was at number 6. Can you use this product or feature? But he hadn't cracked the nut yet of, do people want this? And without knowing that answer, that's why he struggled, and that's why that project struggled. I shouldn't say he struggled. He's an excellent researcher, and he did a great project. It just so happened that the research wasn't aligned to a need. So this is where, when you're misaligned, that's where the false positives come in. That's where confusion pops up. And that's where I think we struggle to find the right type of research to get us answers that help. So when you use a framework like this, it makes it so much easier to align your efforts to the work that's going to come or the work that you're going to do. So what I say is, when in doubt, confirm the need. For many folks and many companies, you'll hear that, that dream of, the thing I'm building is so good, people will want to learn and use it. And the truth is, very few products or features get treated like this. If people don't understand what you've built, they've got better things to do than to try to sort it out, understand something new, and bend their workflows to this new thing, right? Product Hunt and Hacker News and a ton of other sites will tell you, this is the best thing you didn't know you needed. And unfortunately, a lot of VC firms will tell you they've burned out companies really fast because people didn't know they needed it. And then when they found out, they still didn't need it, right? It's that need. And you have to figure out how to match to the needs, then you can get into the details of more of the nuts and bolts of an application or feature. So as you work on a product, ask yourself, how can I validate the need? Who could you talk to clarify your use cases? Do you understand the mental model of a problem, right? This is a big one that I think a lot of projects could do a little bit more of. Do we understand the mental model of the problem we're trying to solve so that it matches the people we hope will use it? A great example of projects, like when you saw Google Glass launched. Google Glass launched and it solved a problem nobody had. Nobody wanted to wear the internet on their face. That problem wasn't there yet. So whatever Google Glass could have done, no one really saw it as satisfying a need, along with all the other issues it had. And remember, Google does a lot of research. So if Google can swing and miss on something like this, everyone else can. I could rattle off a list of other things. Think about how many projects or products that have been launched from Amazon, from Microsoft, from I guess I should say Alphabet now, or from Meta. Products that launched, but they didn't quite match up with what people needed. They didn't quite match up to a workflow. Something didn't quite click. And again, these are all wonderful companies with very smart people who do lots of great research. So I take that as inspiration that if other people can make a mistake like this, then it's something we can all make mistakes with and we can all learn from it. That's what I want from this. A false positive can be very frustrating, but I want to learn from it and try to avoid it next time. So going through all of these steps, I think Clint's saying everybody screws up sometimes, and some people screw up more than others. Again, research is about learning. Research is about asking questions and not knowing what answers you're going to get and being okay. And I am going to pause. I'm going to take a second because Joe Garlick just said, rest in peace, Google Reader and Inbox. And I miss those things. I miss Google Reader and Inbox almost a little bit more than some of my relatives. So again, thinking about the need, one of the things I ask teams to do is to think about a quick series of qualitative interviews to help clarify what's going on. Some time to set up a program to answer the questions that come beforehand, right? If we're about to do a project to ask, do people want this product or feature? Let's make sure we understand the workflows. Let's make sure we understand how people currently solve a problem. And more importantly, make sure we know who the users are and that people need it. And the other secret weapon to help you in this is this goes into your recruiting. Focus on your recruiting. If you recruit people to look at something that they don't have an interest in, you're going to get, unfortunately, very superficial results and won't necessarily generate a lot of insights. Think about your recruit. If the person you're going to spend the next hour with talking about your product doesn't think about the problem that the product solves, maybe they're not the right person to talk to. If the thing you're about to show is a feature that this other person solves the problem with another workflow, maybe they solve it with another app, maybe they solve it with something offline, right? There's a lot of times we ask people, hey, we have a way, I'd like to show you something that does something online. And some people might say, well, I do that already, but I have a really nice analog process for it, right? There's a lot of different ways to do this. So confirming the need, using that to help craft your project and to help craft your recruit. Because again, I think the recruit is the missing link in a lot of this too. So make sure you're bringing the right people in. So it's a little more time up front, but it saves you time down the road because you've brought the right people in and you're asking them the right questions. Again, it's a framework that I built off of Tomer's wonderful book. And if it's something here that you see that's interesting and you think, hey, you know what? I could rearrange this. I could make it even better. Steal it, make it better. Do your talk next year at UX New Zealand with, hey, I saw this and I found a way to make it even better. That's the great part about our industry is people are always sharing. They're pushing ideas into the middle. Tomer is a wonderful gentleman who gave me a little bit of time when I had some questions to help me formulate this. I have time. If there's something, if you think you can make this better, hit me up, talk to me. I'd love to see what you can do with it because it's always about the next great idea and sharing. So research, is perhaps one of the most fun aspects, I think, of UX. It is challenging, it's satisfying, but it's kind of like a great cocktail, right? You have that moment of, it's so well done. When it works, it works. And unfortunately, truly enough, even a poorly made cocktail can be really good. You know, when you're thirsty and you're waiting for it. And if you're in Wellington, you have the Hawthorne Lounge, which is one of my favorite cocktail bars in the world. So with that, thank you so much for your time. Keep asking questions, keep learning. Ask me questions later on. Hit me up via email, shoot me a message in the chat. I'd love to see what you could do with this. And again, I'd love to see you at actually UX New Zealand when we do it in February, because I'm going to do a workshop where we're going to get deep into this. This skims across the surface, but I've got exercises, details, and we'll do a lot more to show you how to make this not just a framework, but a set of exercises and a way to work. So thank you so much, everyone.